Between aging and busy lifestyles, many women struggle with maintaining their physical and mental wellness. At Aquavita Concierge Healthcare Services for Women, we can help you revitalize your health and reclaim your life. We start from within by balancing your hormones, allowing your body to achieve and maintain desired weight goals. We also specialize in peptide therapies, regenerative medicine, sexual health, and aesthetics in our state-of-the-art facilities. Feel better, look better, live better. At Aquavita, visit aquavitality.com and begin your journey today.
On Instacart, I can shop a huge selection of pet supplies, from that one brush that scratches him just right, to that extra comfy bed he can't wait to flop down in. And I get everything delivered right to my door in as fast as 1 hour. Okay, settle down. I know it's here. Yes, very exciting. Visit instacart.com or download the app to get a free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply. Instacart. Add life to cart.
Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis? Happy Thursday. I'm early today because it has already been a long morning of note-taking, and there's no way I could do this all in one tonight. I got a long evening doing mom stuff, so I'm going to do this part, hopefully catch you up on the rest of the day in a smaller episode this evening. But they have been playing the entire interview they had with Angela Wagner at the border crossing. So it's been interesting. All right, before we get started, music fact of the day, the song Vienna by Billy Joel. Great song. So he was asked, what is the meaning of the song Vienna? And he said, it's an observation that you have your whole life to live. A lot of people in their 20s think they have to get it all together by their 30s, and they kill themselves trying to get to the golden ring. You have an entire life to live. The lyrics, slow down, you crazy child. In other words, you have your whole life. And he also talks about as a society, we tend to put older people away, and it's all about young people. And then he said, wait a minute. Why do I have this whole lifespan? What's the point of it? Some people will get there sooner. Some people will get there later. Slow down. You're going to be fine. No matter what you do, be good at it. And whenever you get there, you get there. His dad moved to Vienna when he was a young kid, and he tracked him down in his 20s. Just quickly about the older person reference. And he noticed a woman who was very elderly just sweeping the streets. And he asked his dad, what's the point? And he said, well, it gives her something to do. It makes her feel useful. So I thought that was pretty cool. All right, let's jump into this because, y'all, I'm 20 pages deep on notes. And I'm just going to say this. Angela sounds like Stevie Nicks if Stevie Nicks were crazy and had diabetes, and I cannot unhear it. So speaking of Stevie Nicks, I got 9 days. Super stoked. All right. So the first part of the day was super quick. Agent Scheider was back on the stand. Judge Deering sustained the state's objection about allowing Jake's interview to be played from the border, but they let Angela's. So the prosecution also asks about the wiretaps that they put in the car during the interviews at the border. And he explains that as the Wagners were released, they thought there would be conversations about the questioning, and there was not. They didn't talk about it. So the wiretaps, he acknowledged, did not work well. He said road noise made it impossible to hear anything. And when they were stationary, they could hear, but there was never anything said pertinent to the investigation on those wiretaps. And there was no cross. So the next witness is BCI Special Agent Jennifer Comisford. She had been on the investigation from the very, very beginning. She went to scene 1. When she got there, they were actually still waiting on search warrants. Eventually, she went to the Pike County Sheriff's Office and did some interviews that day. She was at all the major search warrant locations, just right in the middle of the action as far as the investigation went. She interviewed inmates, she said, and she also was there at the border crossing interviews, and she was in with Angela. That interview lasted 2 hours and 4 minutes. I was a little bit behind. I had to stop a couple of times, but It lasted 2 hours and 4 minutes in its entirety, and they played it this morning. So it was a custodial interview, meaning that the Wagners were not free to leave until Border Patrol had finished their work, and they play the interview. And the first thing Angela says is she's talking to somebody and says she's not really comfortable leaving the kids, meaning Bovine and Sophia, with somebody. And at first, she's very lighthearted in this interview. The agent said they came up here to get away from all the noise in Pike County to talk to them. They talk about the media being all over the story and asks if they've been keeping up with it. And she said, of course. She said, I'm mad. Absolutely. I'm severely mad at several people. The agent said, I haven't been involved from the start. How is Alaska? He said, and he's just breaking the ice. He said, the reason I ask is because I want to go. And Angela said, oh, we love it. You should go. So he talks about it being isolated up there. And Angela says there's bigger cities nearby, just like anywhere else you would go. She said there's no humidity. It's a little colder at night. You have to wear sweatshirts and a blanket. And she said when they were there in 2007, they went to Seward. Thank you for the listener who told me how to pronounce that, by the way. The weather is not much different there, she said, ultimately, than it is in Ohio, but Alaska does get more snow. And they talk about driving through Canada, and she said it was nothing for miles and miles. Then you have 2 3-year-olds who need to go to the bathroom every 5 seconds. She explains they're both 3, that Bovine would be 4 in July, and that Bovine and Sophia are 4 months apart. She said it was hard driving with the kids. At the end of the day, you're worn out. She said, we watched Trolls the night we left and watched it 25 times. She also said the kids like Shrek, Ice Age, Bovine like dinosaurs. So the agent tells her that they have no part in all the media hoopla surrounding the case, and they just want to talk and kind of get a fresh start with the Wagners. And Angela says, ask away. So the agent reads her Miranda rights. They have to do that since she wasn't free to leave. Then she has to read from a piece of paper acknowledging that she's been read her rights and that she's agreeing to talk to them without a lawyer. And that was signed at 10:10 a.m. by Angela. And then the interview officially gets started. So the agent talks about all the noise at home and asks her take on it. And she said, well, what part do you want to know about? And he said he wants to know about her relationship with the Rodens. And Angela said the relationship she had with the Rodens really was just through Hannah Mae. Her and Jake were planning to get married. They had it all planned out. And then she wanted a break, talking about Hannah Mae. She said Jake was hurt because Hannah Mae was the love of his life. And he doesn't take things lightly. She said, like with Sophie, he's the best dad he can be. He was hurt and upset a while, but she said they stayed best friends. They talked. Everything they did was for Sophie. And then she was praising Hannah Mae, saying she breastfed her for the longest time, physically took care of herself while she was doing that. And she said Sophie was born with the flap too big, and I'm not sure what she's talking about, and said she would stop breathing at night. If you heard snoring, she was okay. But if you didn't hear Sophie snoring, she had stopped breathing. So she had surgery when she was 6 months old. Angela said she cried before they took her back. She said they went through a lot, meaning Jake and Hannah Mae at this time. There were many trips to Cincinnati every month, a lot of stress. And Sophie came through better than some kids. Some kids need feeding tubes, and she didn't. So they were together when the surgery happened. And she said it's only been a year since, and she calls the murders the incident. That's how she refers to it. She said when Sophie was born, Hannah Mae lived at their house and Jake drove a truck. Because Hannah Mae and Jake wasn't married, she would go stay with her family when Jake was on the road, and Sophia would go with her. So when Jake came back home, they would come stay at the Wagner house. She said they were together for 5 years total, and they split up about 6 months before the incident. She said she didn't know why Hannah Mae broke up with him. She said she was young, and she said Hannah Mae was 13 and my son was 16 and a half when they met. They met at a fair. She looked at Jake and said, you want to pet my rabbit? Sometimes Sophia looks just like her. And then Jennifer, who is the witness on the stand, by the way, while this is playing, just sitting there, says that has to be tough. And Angela says, Hannah called me mom. And yes, it's hard. I try not to think about it. I try not to get upset in front of them, meaning the kids, the little kids. She said, on this trip, we passed a campground. And Sophie says, there's my mommy and my Nana. And I said, where, honey? And she said, they're camping. They're coming with us. So Angela says, I just let her talk. And she gets her play phone and calls her mommy and Nana. Dana was her Nana, and on the weekends, she would take Sophia and Brentley somewhere, which was Frankie's oldest. She said Dana would take the kids shopping, out to eat, to the zoo. That's what she did on her days off. So Dana was very close to the grandkids too. So they asked Angela about her relationship with Hannah Mae, and she said it was kind of a typical mom-daughter relationship. She was a teenager when she first started hanging around, and Angela said, I thought she was a spoiled brat because she was. She was 13 and her dad let her get away with everything. She said, for example, it could be raining and she would bring her friends over to hang out, and they would run outside and come back in and plop their butt down. And Angela said, we live on a farm, but I would say, get your butt outside and get the mud off. And she would give me a look and a snarl. She would tell Jake I was mean. So the agent says he wants to get as much information about the Roden family as they can. And he said families are, tight knit. Sometimes it's hard to get inside the circle. And he said, we know Hannah Mae had other relationships. How did that go? Angela said by the point when he found out, he didn't know for a long time. She would call and text him, and they'd talk about getting back together. Before she moved out, she would leave Sophie and go out with her mom. So when Jake was home, he wanted to be with Sophie. If Hannah Mae went somewhere with Dana, Jake would say, I want to see Sophie, just leave her with me. So she started going and would be gone all day, and Sophie would be with them during that time. She said later Jake found out Hannah Mae wasn't with her mom. When Sophia got sick one time, I believe that's what she said. They got in touch with Dana, but Dana said Hannah Mae wasn't there and she hadn't seen her. Dana said, I think she was at her cousin's house or something like that. After Jake found out she had all these other boyfriends along the way, after they broke up, they decided not to get back together, which there's never been anything I've heard said about her cheating on Jake while they were actually together. He wasn't mad enough to do something like that because of one thing. He wouldn't do it. She said Hannah Mae loved her mom and they were super close. Jake would never do that to her. To this day, everything is about Sophia. And as far as Dana, Chris, and little Chris, who spent a lot of time, little Chris spent a lot of time at her house because if Hannah Mae was there, Chris Sr.'s rule was that little Chris had to be there. And the agent mentioned something about little Chris being rambunctious, and she said little Chris was spoiled. She said at 10 or 11, if he didn't get his way, he would lay on the floor and just pitch a fit. She said one time they went fishing, and on the way home, he got mad about something and literally jumped out of the car and threw a fit in the middle of the road. She said one time he was at my house and didn't want to pick up trash, so he laid down in my driveway and threw a fit. I had never seen anything like that before in a kid his age. So the agent asks if little Chris acted that way in front of his dad, and Angela said, you don't touch little Chris. You don't say anything bad about little Chris. She said things several times, and she wasn't raised the way little Chris was. If you said something to Chris, he would say, if you don't like him, Hannah Mae doesn't come over either. He was a good kid, but she said he was really spoiled. She said she didn't talk to Chris Sr. much. They would say hello. They made dinner a couple of times. But she said he got mad at her when Hannah Mae got pregnant with Sophia. She said Hannah Mae went 4 months without going to the doctor just so she wouldn't have to tell her parents. But Angela said, one day I finally said, this is my grandchild. You're going to the doctor. And she told Hannah Mae, either I can tell your parents or you can. And she took her to the doctor, and apparently Hannah Mae knew someone that worked at the office, and 2 days later, everybody knew. Jake said, we're going to tell because he didn't like to hide things. And Chris was just mad at her. She said Billy and Chris's relationship she never got involved in it. She said they were best friends and Billy was at Chris's a lot. Chris would come over to their house to see Sophia or to borrow something. And at one point, Jake worked a job for him fixing up a house in Piketon. The boys went to the lake one summer way before there were any babies. And she said something about Ryan and Jonathan. These are agents, I believe, asked me if I knew their conversations. And Angela said she didn't. She also talked about the tip about the fight.
Why don't more infant formula companies use organic, grass-fed whole milk instead of skim? Why don't more infant formula companies use the latest breast milk science? Why don't more infant formula companies run their own clinical trials? Why don't more infant formula companies use more of the proteins found in breast milk? Why don't more infant formula companies have their own factories instead of outsourcing their manufacturing? We wondered the same thing. So we made ByHeart, an infant formula company on a mission to get a lot closer to the most superfood on the planet, breast milk. Our patented protein blend has more of the important and most abundant proteins actually found in breast milk. We're the first and only U.S.-made formula to use organic, grass-fed whole milk, not skim. We even conducted the largest clinical trial by a new infant formula company in a quarter century, with clinically proven benefits like easier digestion, less spit up, and softer poops versus a leading infant formula. And we make our own formula in the USA and our very own factories in Iowa, Oregon, and Pennsylvania. ByHeart, a better formula for formula. Learn more at byheart.com.
She said Leonard is screaming this theory now. They would have never done that, talking about, I believe, the rumor that Chris Sr. and Billy got into an altercation about a week before the murders. She said she's known Billy since she was 14. She was 20 when they got married. George was their firstborn, and then Jake. She said they separated. It wasn't marital issues, but they just don't see things the way they used to. He stays at his mom's, not because of us, but mainly because of his dad. And he's got like 3 months to live. He had COPD and all kinds of other ailments that was terminal. She said Billy loved his dad and that Billy was the baby of the family. And he kept saying while they were in Alaska, he should be home. When Hannah Mae got pregnant with Kylie, Jake never talked to the other boyfriends, according to Angela. The only time he talked to Charlie Gilly was when they were actually in the courtroom after the murders for the paternity testing. The only reason was her and Charlie broke up. They went off and did what they did. Or she said the only reason Jake was tested for paternity is because when Hannah Mae and Charlie broke up, apparently her and Jake were intimate again. And so she said Jake was in love with Hannah Mae and may have taken her back. But then she said, on the other hand, I don't know. We know that apparently Jake was willing to raise Kylie as if that were his baby and definitely would have taken her back. There at the end, he was over it, according to Angela. Hannah Mae texted me and was worried I would be upset she was pregnant with baby Kylie. She said I wasn't. She said I was upset when she left Jake. We had a wonderful relationship as mother and daughter. God, I said daughter. Lord have mercy. Her and Dana weren't really close, but Bolvine would even call her Nana. But she said that her and her mom were close earlier and then they're not close. So I don't know if she's trying to put herself in a position of being like that positive maternal figure who would never plot her murder in that discrepancy. She said, when the babies were born, I was going to be Nana, but Dana was there when Sophie was born. She said something about George being sick and she wasn't there. And she said, so Dana got the nickname Nana. So Angela decided she would be Gammy, but they couldn't say it. The kids couldn't say it. So they call her Amity. Bolvine calls me mommy. She said he's a little confused. She said her relationship with Dana before the breakup was very amicable. They weren't buddies. They didn't go hang out together, but they'd talk if she would pick up or drop off Sophia or if they bumped into each other around town. When Hannah Mae was pregnant, she was young and pretty and worked hard to lose weight after Sophia. She said if she's not going to be with Jake, she's going to have a relationship. And if you go through her text, you will see where she texted me. And I told her I wasn't upset she was pregnant. She would stay for a couple of hours when she would pick Sophia up. And I missed her when she left. When we couldn't sleep when she lived here, she said they would sit at the top of the stairs and talk. And when she left, I missed that. We cooked together. She said Billy's relationship with Hannah Mae was good. He called her his brat. I told Chris in the beginning, if they break up, she's still going to be my daughter. You're going to have to share. She said she was a brat, a smart aleck, and she could give you the most evil looks in the world, but that was Hannah. And so the agent asked if the breakup strained Chris and Billy's friendship, and she said she never saw it if it did. Hannah Mae wasn't keeping her into the bargain by keeping Sophia over there on the schedule she was supposed to. And the man, for instance, she gave just kind of a thing about how they did work together. So apparently the Manleys would have their Christmas dinner at 8 a.m. on Christmas Day because they wanted it over and done with by noon. That's funny. So she said we accommodated her and they would split the day. Jake would get Sophia after Hannah Mae was finished at the Manleys. She said her family lives an hour away in South Webster, so it took them a little while to get there. She said sometimes Hannah Mae would fuss about certain things and Chris would intervene. Sometimes they would swap days and sometimes Jake would not be home, so they would switch where it worked for both of them. And the agent asked if he still drove trucks. And she said no. She said Billy broke his back and it was a little hard to hear. I don't know if one of the attorneys at the desk was fumbling with something or if it was the agent in the audio, but it was hard to hear this. She said he went out one time by himself and got pinned in the trailer and we didn't know for a while. He didn't have surgery, but he did have to wear a brace, which this happened a couple of years ago. At this point, this is 2017. So he still has pain from it. And she said they switched weekends when Jake stopped driving trucks. She said Hannah Mae wanted her weekends. And then so they switched to Jake getting Sophia on Saturdays. Then she started working after she got pregnant. Jake had her when she was really sick with Kylie, and Jake had her more when she was pregnant than any time before she wasn't. She said that Sophia is rambunctious and doesn't sleep a lot. So she would call Jake and say, I need to sleep or I need to take a shower. And so he would get her. Within her own family, Hannah Mae and her mom didn't have a good relationship. Hannah Mae said when she was little, her mom was always gone hanging out at bars and would leave the kids with Bobby Joe. So Chris would leave to go get her and bring her home. She said she heard some things about Chris Sr.'s dad, but Hannah Mae loved him. Hannah Mae and Chris were close as far as she knew. She knew the other Rodens, or she said, I knowed of them, met them a couple of times, saw them a few times. She did go to one of the 4th of July parties that Chris would throw every year, but she said it was too wild for her. Then she mentions at this point, Brentley, which is Frankie's oldest and was in the house as a 3-year-old when the murders happened. At that point, when she went to the party, Brentley was a baby. And she said they were shooting fireworks around him. They were smoking in his face. And she said it bothered her because he was breathing all the stuff in. She said, I'm not a party person. And then it switches over to Corey Holdren and what she knew about him, which, as we know, Corey Holdren was who Hannah was with when she was murdered. And he was very much, it seems, in love with Hannah Mae and Sophie. I saw the pictures on Hannah Mae's Facebook. I still need to put those out there. Sorry, guys. I keep forgetting. The one that Angela couldn't look at because Hannah Mae looked genuinely happy. Corey looked happy and Sophia looked happy. She said that all she knew was that Corey was into drugs. Now, this is interesting. I didn't know this. She was in the Air Force in 1988 for a year and a half, and she was working in supply. She went to Lackland for boot camp, and she left because her parents got divorced, and her dad was disabled, so it was a hardship release. And When asked about Kenneth, she said she saw him at Christmas. So if she would take Hannah Mae home or get Sophia from Christmas, the Christmas swap. She had been to Dana's old house where Frankie and Hannah Hazel were murdered, but not the new one that they had just moved in. She had been in Chris Sr.'s trailer one time about 4 years prior, but she didn't go back because she didn't like all the dog hair. According to her, she knew nothing about the marijuana grow. She said the reason that she went into the house 4 years prior was that Billy had to stop by because Chris Sr. wanted to borrow her trailer to get the fireworks for a 4th of July celebration. She said, actually, it's the one you guys confiscated. And Chris would go buy wholesale fireworks for his party. And sometimes he would sell some fireworks to people. She said the dogs, if Chris Sr. was there, you're okay. She said Chance the pit bull is a loving dog, sweet as he can be. But she said Jake had been kind of grabbed in the pants area on the booty by Chance. He went looking for Hannah Mae, and Chance got him. Her initial thoughts after the murders was that she was horrified. Hannah Mae had been at her house just a few days before to show them the newborn Kylie. Her, George, Jake, and the babies were there, and Hannah Mae was making fun of Jake because Jake dyed his hair. And she said it turned out darker than he wanted. So Hannah Mae was making fun of him. That's creepy, y'all. She said Kylie was super tiny. She said she found out about the murders on the news. Billy was watching it, and the agents asked if they were separated. She says, not really. He goes and stays at his mom's a day or two at a time, and then he'll come back with her for a day. We know that's a lie because his cell phone data showed that the night of the murders was the only time that whole month he was there. She said she was in the kitchen and Billy came in and started freaking out. She said Jake went somewhere that morning she couldn't remember, and so her and Billy watched the TV. She said Jake went to the hospital where April was. She testified previously, if you remembered, she was the one that was really upset saying that that Jake hugged her and still had Hannah Mae's blood on him. And it was too much for her. She said that Jake went to the hospital to see about Kylie. And she said she knew that Hannah Mae knew people everywhere. She had a cousin everywhere. And apparently that was a joke during, I think, jury selection or at some point in this trial, somebody in the jury had a cousin, or I don't know. Maybe it was more recent. She said Hannah Mae's extended family would stop her, meaning Angela, and say hi, but she didn't know them enough to call them about getting updated throughout the day of the murders about the case. So the agent kind of points out, well, you have a blood connection to the Rodens now. The whole community knows at this point something has happened to the Roden family. And were you getting details from anybody? She said a couple of people called Jake and that he was crying and upset. Him and George were gone. Then they were outside. She said she took the kids out of the room when this was on the TV. And she said, I'm always with the kids. If you remember, in openings, George's attorney, I don't know why they're going with this defense, said that he didn't know about the murders until Jake got a phone call. They were in the car going somewhere. I would have totally said, they threatened to kill me if I didn't go. And my brother will tell you I shot nobody. I think maybe, honestly, y'all, if he'd have went that route, he might have a little bit of a chance of at least a hung jury. She said, the agent said George had a lesser connection to the Rodens, and she said him and Frankie hung out a bit, but she didn't. She said that George did not have a big connection with the Rodens on a daily basis. The agent asked if she was ever at Kenneth's in the holler. We have that around here. We call it the holler. The only place she said she was at the swimming pond that Chris built at Brady Roden's house one time, and this was before the babies were born. And if you remember, that was talked about prior to, I believe, George went there with, I think it was Samantha that testified that they all went to that pond one time. She heard Kenneth and them were into shady stuff when it came out on the news. Billy said he knew, but he didn't tell her until after the murders. And he would come home and say Chris would say stuff like he was upset with little Chris because of things he was doing. Or Billy would say, I saw Brat up there today. And Angela said she would ask how she was doing, Brat being what Billy supposedly called Hannah Mae. In the beginning, she said they told each other everything when the kids were born, her and Billy. They still talked about things, but she said she became more involved with the kids and he started driving a truck. And so he's talking to people out on the road she doesn't know. And so it was like they had two separate lives. The agent said, your son's with a girl who's a member of the Roden family, and you have a granddaughter who you're enamored with. And Angela gives this creepy little giggle when he says that. And she's associated with this lifestyle over here. What's your reaction when you hear this about the marijuana grow? And Angela says, here's the thing. I think they should have done that? No. But as far as I could tell, they didn't make it public. If this hadn't happened, nobody would have known they were growing it. Sophia wouldn't know. And then he asked her if Billy had any involvement with it or just the knowledge of it. And she said no involvement. But Billy wouldn't have given Chris Sr. his opinion on it. That was his best friend.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
I think she said he wouldn't give his opinion, but again, there was some noise. She said he probably sat and listened to Chris Sr. She said, as far as Sophie, we sold the farm. We moved to Alaska because she didn't want her growing up in an area where when she gets older, people say your parents were killed. They were this, they were that. She has good memories of her mom. And she said, it's going to be bad enough when she's a teenager. You know, there's Facebook. And then when she's old enough to start looking things up, you know, and I was thinking, and I actually tweeted this out earlier. You think about Sophia and Bovine and what the Rodens have given them, which is at some point, especially Sophia, will be told what happened to pretty much her entire family on her mother's side. And she's going to find out that this was over custody. And that's going to be a really heavy burden for that kid to bear for the rest of her life, even though she had no choice in it. And it's just kind of like the pain the Wagners have inflicted will continue throughout Sophie's life because, you know, hopefully she will come to the understanding that she had no control over what these crazy people she's related to did. But at the same time, you hope that it doesn't cause her a lot of guilt or issues because it's centered around custody of her, which was no fault of her own. And that's just very sad. So Angela goes on to talk about that, taking her to parties as a chore because they're afraid someone will scream that Hannah Mae was killed. She said, I had to watch out on the farm. If a duck got killed, we didn't say the duck's in heaven because she said, we tell her mom is in heaven visiting and we don't want her to associate a duck dying with her mom in heaven. The agent asks if the day of the murders, they got more information as the day progressed. And she said they got more on the news. Jake went to the hospital. She said to check on Kylie. They wouldn't let him in, so he talked to the family and came back. At first, they weren't sure if it was some of the Rodens or all of them. They talked to Chelsea that day, which is Frankie's ex and the mother of his oldest. And someone else, I didn't hear the name. She said she stayed with Sophie, but when asked if Billy or Jake went to the scenes, she doesn't know and she doesn't think so. She said Billy, George, and Jake went to the funerals and she stayed home with the kids. They were talking about the word in the community. All they heard was there were some black people up there and there was a fight. The agent asked if she heard that Chris Jr. had gotten into it with some black guys, and she heard about that before or after. And she said she heard about that after. She said, I don't talk to a lot of people. I'm preoccupied with the kids. She said, I have friends, but I don't do things with them or chit chat with them every day. In other words, she's obsessed with her grandkids, which, look, grandkids are a great thing, I'm sure. I'm happy to wait and find out about 10 years at least. But her obsession, as we know, was way over the top. She said, I have a dog kennel and my business. I'm busy. I don't know too much, only what you hear on Facebook or the news or through rumors. Some of the groups, they have me as a fighter pilot. Billy went to South America with me and had plastic surgery. She's talking about rumors. When we moved through Canada, we didn't have the internet for a few days. And she said, I didn't post on Facebook for a few days. Then it became, the newspaper says we sold the house for $165,000. She said we sold it for $200,000. And she said the rumors were they had a chop shop in the barn. Her trailer was a pickup that was used in, and then she stopped. She said that my trailer was a pickup truck that was used in, and then she says sitting at Chris's. I think, what truck did they get out of the barn? It wasn't ours. It was the new owner's. And then she said again, I kept thinking, what truck did they get out of the barn? We left a few things. Now, remember, they bought a truck for these murders. So I'm sure when they were in Alaska and find out there's all these big search warrants being executed, they're probably freaking out. They don't know on the Wagner farm, did they go in the bottom of the pond where they had the guns in concrete? They have no clue. I'm sure that was as it should be, a very stressful time up in Alaska. Although last night I watched an interview with somebody I believe to be Jake's Alaskan wife. And she said that she was told by her pastor, who I do remember reading an article where he was very defensive of the Wagner family while they were there. And she said the reason that she felt okay in getting together with Jake was that the pastor said we need to love them and support them and not listen to rumor. Clearly, that pastor led her in the wrong direction. She said, I had my brother get a list of what they took at Bernie Brown's, which is where the trailers were. Remember, it was on somebody else's property. He told me they came in and got the trailers. And then she talked to Ryan. And Ryan said they were checking to see if it was stolen. Ryan is one of the agents. She said, I ripped his butt because I had the title, new tags, and I'd had that trailer for 10 years. So the agent asked, why do you think they searched the farm? And Angela says, I have no idea. You guys tell me. You're with BCI. She said, here's the thing. They come to Peterson and talk to Jake 2 to 3 weeks before vacation. And it's nap time. They show up and say they wanted his phone. It's not that Jake didn't want to hand his phone over. He uses it for work. Jake says, if you get to the point to where you have to have it with no exceptions, I have, come get it, but I have to have it right now. In other words, get a search warrant. And she said the agents were fine with that. So she said when they were loading the trailers one day and Brian and other guys came down, he's asking me all kinds of weird questions like, where do you haul cattle to? The agent asks again, why do you think they want the phones? And she said, I'm asking for your opinion. And Angela said the cyber guy came and I'm inside taking care of Bolvine. And Sophia runs in and says, they're taking my daddy's phone. Come get him. She said she's still distraught of them taking the phone that day, meaning Sophie. The agent said, why do you think they searched the phones? And Angela said she was told by one of the agents they thought there may be information on there. And you may not see it, but they might look at it a different way and they wanted to look. So Jake gave him the phone. He had to go buy a new one. And Jake had to email all of his passwords that he had. She said, we gave him everything. And she said, that's what I'm mad about. When we were packing that day, they watched us pack. They knew where the trailers were. They knew when we were leaving and coming back. New cell phone numbers, I call them. We get halfway down the road and they're searching. I'm sorry, what they did to our trailers is ridiculous. When I get home, I will have to pitch half of it in the trash. I have pictures of it that my brother took. 75% of that stuff was Bolvine and Sophia's. That's all we had in those trailers. Her clothes are strewn all over the yard. All they had to do was ask. I would open the door. I have nothing to hide. She said, I'll sit it out for you. You search it. I'll put it back in. I told them when I got to Canada, and I told them what hotel I was in. We sold half of it before we left. And then they jumped to hunting. And she said, Billy and Jake are definitely hunters. The agent asks if they like guns. And she said, they're not obsessed with it. Okay, Angela. He asked what she has. And she said she has 22s. And the agent says, with you being a mom and a grandma, do you shop a lot for the boys? What kind of stuff would you buy? So you see now it's taken this long for him to really kind of start hinting at some of the things that they know for sure at this point, which is that the casings match from the Peterson Road to the crime scenes 2 and 3, which is Frankie, Hannah Hazel, Dana, Little Chris, Hannah Mae. Also, they've got the evidence of her at Walmart. They have found the receipt. They've got the surveillance of her and the car. So the agent asks, do you buy clothing? And she said kind of everything. Jake likes to be the one to buy for Sophia. The agent asked, where do you shop in that area? Where do you like to go? And she said, Bass Pro. The babies love it, but we really don't buy there. 90% of my stuff I get at Walmart. And little things for the kids off of Goodwill.com, as long as it comes out of California. You can get Nikes for the kids for $10, by the way. So did the boys ask you sometimes, to get something or whatever? She says sometimes they do all the shopping and I'll give them a list. She said she doesn't go shopping alone. Sometimes she'll take the little kids, but most of the time George and Jake go with her. She said they don't like it, but they'll go in and shop with her. The female agent asked why she thinks they're talking to her today. And she said probably all the rumors going around. And she asked if anyone in the community didn't like them, or if any idea why someone would come forward and say you or someone in your family was involved in murdering the Rodens. And Angela said there's one person maybe, and that would be Tabitha, George's ex-wife, who previously testified last week early, I think. She's Bolvine's and she says and then she says biological mother. She has issues. She says she's bipolar, supposed to be on medications, and Tabby is Tabby, and that's why they're not together. The agent says, why do you think someone would say that about you? And Angela says, if you tell me who it is, I could probably tell you why. The only one I can think is Tabby. She also says that Leonard Manley has never liked Jake. The agent asks about custody. And Angela said that Jake had a lawyer and he had talked to Hannah Mae about it a couple of times. And she said, if you want to know the full details, she gives the name of the lawyer that Jake had during this time. And she says, he can tell you everything. She said Hannah Mae had Sophie 1 week. Jake had her 1 week. School and church, they did not see eye to eye on those issues, but that the whole family worked out a thing. She said, we don't believe in daycare. I never let anyone babysit Jake and George. Never had a need for it. And she said she homeschooled the kids. When Jake had her, if he needed a babysitter, he'd either call Hannah Mae, Angela, George, or Billy. After the incident, the custody documents were still kind of in the same position as they were, she says, when Hannah Mae was alive. So Chris wanted her to get it checked by a lawyer. And Jake's lawyer had said he couldn't be both their lawyers anyway. So Chris got her one. She had an appointment and something came up. And then she said again, she had another appointment, something came up. And that's the way it remained until she was murdered. He asks Angela about a living will for Hannah Mae. And she said she has no idea. So the agent asked the other agent, Jennifer, who's on the stand, if she has that. And this is like when you know it's about to start getting good. And he shows her the forged custody documents. And Leonard said there was a custody battle. And Angela said there never was a custody battle. Diabetes, Lord have mercy. They never went to court. And he asked her if that document looks familiar. And Jennifer asked if the lawyer drafted that up. She said, I figured you would take those papers? She said, I figured you would take those papers. And then she said, those are, well, they must have done them. I don't know when they were done. I don't remember those. What year was Sophie born? Is what one of the agents asked. And Angela said 2013. She was born November 18th, 2013. And the agent said, this is Christmas Eve 2014. So that would have been a year after, Sophie would have been a year and a month. And they say, here's what we're curious about too. Who's this? And they are pointing to that notarized race seal and the signature. And Angela says the signature is her mom's, but she doesn't remember any of this, of course. And then the agent says, this is the date it was printed off your computer. And she says, oh, well, maybe I might have printed it. And the agent says, this is 3 weeks before the murders. And she said, I might have done it, but I don't remember. Now, here's the thing that I notice is up till this point, Angela was quick with her answers, never missed a beat. But the first shred of evidence that's given to her, and she's thinking for answers. It was the pace of her conversation drastically dropped off, and also her tone. And those are things that these agents look for. They're trained to look for when things like this happen. I wonder what her body language was when this was brought out. The agent asked if it was printed, it would have been you. And she said, probably, but I don't remember it. He asked who typed those forms and says it looks like it's an older version of Microsoft Word, like 98. He said, do you know who drafted this form? And she said, maybe I typed this. When asked if it was drafted, she said, when it was drafted, she said she doesn't know. This is what they had talked about. And I know this is what they were going to take to the attorney. And I can't remember when. So the agent said your mom notarized the document Hannah Mae signed and that custody would go to Jake. And the agent said, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm just trying to sort this custody issue. Angela says, if I printed it, I don't know when. They didn't have a battle over custody. So the agent said when they have a notarized document in the event of a death, it would be like if you were, he gives an example. He says, if you and I were married and I end up mysteriously dead and they find a printout 2 or 3 days before my death and they print out my life insurance forms. He said, we're just trying to iron this out before we move on. So he's still really kind of trying to hint to her that like, we're going to move on. And we just, to keep her comfortable, because at this point it's really, really clear she's starting to feel uneasy. So he says it's been a year now since the murders and we want to be diligent. You've been great. You've answered our questions and you've made our jobs easier. But it's interesting to me, it was printed 3 weeks before the murder where Hannah Mae gives custody up to Jake. And he said it's a natural document, meaning this is a thing people do when they have kids. And then you have the document signed when Sophie was 1 and it's printed out less than 3 weeks before the murder. The agent wants to ask about Billy, Jake, and George and says, do you feel Jake would go do anything unusual because he was so broken? And Angela says, no. And the agent says, families are intimate and personal. And if you're sitting here with 2 people, meaning them 2 agents, you don't know who we are, but we're asking you questions about your family. We're trying to figure out, there's some other things I'm going to show you in a bit too, to see what your ideas are. And then the agent said, could something have happened you have no knowledge of between Hannah Mae and Jake? And Angela said, not that I'm aware of. But she said, I wasn't there 24 hours a day. He loved her because of Sophie, but not to the point. And then she said he had nothing against Dana, Frankie, little Chris, or Chris Sr. The agent said the Rodens have a complicated history. There was a daughter, not a daughter, actually. He said daughter, but it's actually a sister of Chris Sr.'s that doesn't come around anymore. Apparently, a grandfather in the family was charged with sexual abuse. And he said they talked to the sister that doesn't come around and they believe her 100%. And he kind of insinuates in some ways it ruined the family. And he said the Rodens were into all kinds of crap. So what he's doing here, he's not trying to bash the Rodens. It's more of a tactic to sort of get Angela back on their side. He said they're growing weed, they're selling cocaine. Hannah Mae was kind of promiscuous, and you can say she's sowing her wild oats, but she has a boyfriend who isn't the father of the baby, and you have grandkids. Sophia is a pawn in this. And he said, I'm trying to wrap my brain around things. I'm not condoning anything that was broken in the search. And Angela said, well, that's fine. So he goes around this whole thing. And then, she's complaining about things way earlier in the interview that were broken when they searched those trailers. The agent says, I think you know where I'm going with this. I'm asking you, Angela. And Angela interrupts. Do you think my son did it or my husband? No. The agent says, can you definitely say no? And Angela said he wouldn't do that. The breakup wasn't worth that. Him and Frankie talked about deer hunting. It was a breakup. As far as Billy, you can't say a bad word about Chris in front of him. His dog he has came from Chris, and you say a bad word about the dog, then you get heck for weeks. The agent said the guys who did the search warrant at Flying W and Peterson, they talked about all the boots Billy owns. I think he said boots. And stuff left there at Flying W. There was a lot of nice stuff. And Angela says, okay. So the agent said, when you shopped, you would buy for Jake or George. And I'm not talking about when they were 10. Angela says, if I'm at Walmart and I see a particular pair of pants that Jake wears, I'll get them. The last bunch he got, his grandma got for him a couple of months ago. She gave money for the kids, and she said, I spent $500 buying stuff like socks. She buys for one. She said the grandma, if she buys for one, she buys for everyone. So the agent interrupts and says, when you buy stuff, shirts, pants, socks, shoes, Angela says, I don't buy shoes. And the agent says sneakers. And Angela says, I know what size they wear, but shoes fit differently. So I don't buy shoes. So she knew exactly what was up. And this was the most quiet she had been during the entire exchange from the very first word that was spoken when she walked in the door. The agent shows her the photo of the shoe print in blood at the crime scene. And he says they know it's the killer's shoe print. He said they have a database for shoe prints that are like fingerprints, and they can take any shoe tread and identify the manufacturer and the size of that shoe. So 3 weeks before the murder, does that ring a bell to you? And they're showing her, I believe, the Walmart receipt. Jennifer says, you don't remember buying them? And she said her dad has a pair. And the agent says, during the search, we have a receipt of those shoes purchased by you. And she kind of stumbles. And then she said, yeah, I did purchase them. And he shows surveillance of the car and asks if that's her excursion. And she says, yeah. And he says, do you know who those shoes were for? You bought 2 pairs of them. And you hear her whisper, I don't know. She says, are you telling me those shoes were used in the murder? And they say, yes. And you bought those shoes 2 weeks before the murders. And Angela says, I don't think they could be those. And the agent says, they are. And we've already matched them. They're identical in the type of shoe and the size. And Angela says, that's fine. That's fine. I bought them, but I didn't. And then she said, they're old men's shoes and they wouldn't wear them. I threw them away. And the agent says, you remember buying them? And Angela says, they wouldn't wear them. And I threw them away. The agent says, why would you buy them if they wouldn't wear them? And she said that was after they saw them. And the agent says, you remember buying them and throwing them away. When did you throw them away? And Angela said, I'm not sure if it was that day. And the agent says, we have the custody document printed out just before her death. 2 weeks before the homicide, you buy shoes that are identical to the ones worn during the murders. And then he pulls out a lab report from the shoe impression that validates that match. He said there's a bloody print and someone's dead and there's no getting around that. He said it's not like a fingerprint even. It's, this is, he talks about how if I go into somebody's house and I touch their coffee table, okay, you can explain that away. But when you've got a shoe print in blood that matches the shoes you bought in the size, there's some explaining to do. And he said, they did a search warrant on the house you sold. And he said, this is a photo of a lab analysis from shell casings that were taken in your driveway. They're an identical match to ones found at some of the crime scenes. And Angela says, the casings? She said they were casings from the crime scenes. The shell casings in your driveway were fired from the same gun that killed. And Angela interrupts and says, there's no way. And she says that like 3 times. There's no way. The agent said, we've had an expert confirm this. And Angela said, they didn't say what they used. The agent said, we know what they used. We have the autopsy reports. And Angela says, a 22. We own several 22s. And the agent said, yeah, but this was a very specific gun that was used. So remember, you've got that Walther Colt 1911 that they even talked to the people in Germany, the manufacturers. He said the casings are a definite match. And Angela says, I understand what you're saying. You know, we're not the only ones who have shot guns at our house. And she really is stumbling, and you can tell she is very much winging this as she goes. The agent says, such as? Angela says, well, Frankie's been there and people who hunt there. And the agent said, look in my eyes. You're far from stupid. Angela says, I don't see how there's a match down here. And the agent says, well, there is. He says, there's other tests that they're waiting on as well. The agent says, could this have been done without your knowledge? And if you knew, you only knew after the fact. He said, I'm trying to salvage something. Your grandkids. I don't want to leave them with nobody. I don't want them to go to no Roden or April Manley. You told me 10 minutes ago, you're sure. Angela interrupts and says, he says we have casings. She says, do you have the gun? And he says, no. So you see there, she's trying to kind of fish for answers and see what exactly do they have beside the casings. So I think at that point, if maybe they'd have said they had the gun and then they know it's Jake's, then would she have cooperated right then? I don't know. But I thought it was interesting. Why would she even care if they had the gun if she's saying the casings didn't come from the farm or the Peterson Road address, rather? He said, we have shoes you bought 2 weeks ago before the murders. Angela said, I did. They didn't like them. They were boots. They wear boots. Whoop-de-doo. And the agent said, you're alone in the store, but you're not alone getting back in the car. And she whispered, who was I with that day? It's like her alter ego comes out. She said, the kids were sleeping. I think they were all in the car. The agent said, we have all this. You understand how it looks. And if you're going to have any chance to talk to us, it's now. The agent said, I'm not against you. I'm more concerned about the grandkids. And I need to know what I need to know what you know. And he said, I'm going to be frank with you because I feel like we have a good rapport, but I don't believe everything you're telling me about this. I believe everything before that you've told me, but not this. And Angela said, I don't know. I don't know the arguments between them or any fights. The agent said, when we ask you about shoes, you say you never bought them shoes. Then when we show you these obscure shoes that were bought, you remember buying them. And you said you brought them home and they didn't like them. They were in the car with you. We can tell. On the actual video, we can tell. And Angela keeps saying, okay. The agent says, so you bring them out there and did they tell you? Or I'm sorry. And did you tell them that you bought them? Quite frankly, I think they're the ugliest shoes in the world. That's what the agent said. She said, when I get in the car, it's not like a normal get in the car. Things are hectic. But I thought the kids were sleeping. So how are things hectic? She said, things always work the way they're supposed to work. And he says, you're not being honest. I can tell by the way you're talking. Angela says, I'm just going to stop right here and I can get an attorney. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to say any more. And the agent said, I don't want to make you mad. Angela says, I know what you're getting at. And I'm just going to get an attorney. Jennifer says, I don't want you to miss the opportunity to talk to us. She said, when you're in jail, the kids go into foster care or the Rodens. And we wanted to give you the opportunity. That's all. They ask if she wants water and she says, yes, please. And she tells Angela she has to sit with her because that's Border Patrol policy. Once they're done with what they're doing to their stuff, they're free to go. The agent says one of our people will escort you. And then that's the end. So right before lunch, the prosecution says, to clarify, it's common for you to say things you don't mean to suspects. And she said, yes. They knew a potential motive was custody. And what was your understanding about the Wagners having concerns about Sophia ending up with the Roden family? There were a lot of objections. And they never really answered that. So I don't know. That's where I stopped. And then the very last thing was she was also aware of the situation with Tabitha and George. So that was nearly an hour episode. I knew it was going to be long, still have half the day to do. So I'm not going to be back home till about 7. I think I'll be able to get a couple of hours of note taking in before I leave. So hopefully a little bit of a shorter episode later today, but I wanted to get this out because this is definitely, I think, going to be the best part of the day. And I didn't want to get it out too late. So hope you have a good rest of your afternoon. Hopefully we'll see you later tonight and we'll sum up the second half of day 22 in the George Wagner trial. See you later.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.